To me, this is a really exciting day because we're kind of trying to bring together all the different threads of conversation that we've had since March. And it's, at least for me, been a really worthwhile and interesting process. We were just talking about submitting sessions for conferences and how it's important to be able to say what didn't work as well as what did work. And I have a list of things that if I did this again, I'd do it differently. But overall, I've just been so happy to meet all of you and work with all of you and get your input. And the team, I think, agrees with me on that. So after the last meeting, we took those 3 whiteboards that we had filled with the ideas from topics to formats to audiences for directions to go for spring programming. And the technical advisor team, we got together, we'd read them all over, we started talking about, did we have enough money to do all 3? How could we choose if we had to choose? Maybe we should vote. And none of us wanted to throw anything out. And I can't exactly say where the conversation turned, but it happened pretty quickly that some very astute technical advisors thinking about things that had been said in the conversation came up with what we think is a pretty neat solution. But what we have to find out from you is if you agree, because obviously the idea here was that you were driving the development of the program. I have a handout here, want to pass it on there, that summarizes as best we could what we're proposing. And in it, there are yellow highlights, and those reference specifically your ideas, what we heard you say. The big picture here is we're going to propose not thinking of this as 2 programs for the spring, as if 2 single programs that happen, one at Tyre and one at HSP, but rather that it is a project, a continuation of this project. And within that project are embedded 2 programs that help move that project forward in some way. So what is the project? We are talking about, in the lingo here at HSP, what we would call a digital history project, what you might just think of as a website. That we develop a website that within it captures and has a way to share with the public the 3 big ideas that you had. So one of those, just quickly, was a chronological map or a timeline of Puerto Rican history in Philadelphia. Another was a reaction to and continuation of making public the oral histories. And a third was kind of a revisiting of the print background and history at Tyre and that 25th anniversary exhibition they had where they had community curators, in a sense, reflect upon the art. So those were the 3 biggies that had been up on the board. Well, what if this website is a timeline, and as you go through time, it's very rich with links that link you to oral histories, link you to documents in the archives, link you to images of artwork from either collection that are relevant. And on top of that, what if with those things are reflections by you or people like you, so that we get that, how does this matter, this kind of history, in a contemporary sense. So that's the big outline of what this would be like. Just so you know, we also really took to heart the fact that you talked a lot about wanting to reach youth and curriculum development. And we even, as a group, talked a little bit last time about how difficult that might be in terms of time frame for doing that and resources to do with that. The grant, as it was written, was really to plan programs for people like you. And so if we do this website, it starts off for people like you, but of course anybody can look at it, and it could serve as the basis for developing a curriculum. And HSP, and hopefully working with Tyre, are committed to, after this grant is over, doing that. That next year we would develop curriculum units around this material. So we aren't giving up on the youth, we're just not making them front and center right now. So where do the actual programs fit in? Well, one might be to have a program probably around the beginning of March where we could invite the public in to hear about all of these things, kind of preview some of them, and actually get their reflections. So that piece about like standing in front of an artwork and talking about what it means to you, that could happen then. And we could be from that program developing content to go onto the website, as well as getting some larger community reaction to, what is most salient for the most number of people. And then the final program would be in June, and it would be the unveiling of the website, a public unveiling, and could include perhaps a panel of people sitting around this table talking about what the process meant, how it came to be, and it could be just a great party. Carmen and I were talking about the first program made sense to have at Taller and the second here, and she was like, "Are you ready for a big Latino party?" We're like, "Of course we are." So that's where the programs would fit in. They would be sort of part and parcel of that website. Now, in terms of how do we get this work done and where do you all fit in, really gratified with the commitment and the loyalty that many of you have had to this project. And this is when I said one of those things I might do differently if I rewrote the grant, is that when we wrote the grant, we thought, oh, well, we'll have this pause group help us figure this all out, but we won't make them have to do the hard work of actually creating the program. Our staff will just do that. And what I came to realize is that many of you are willing to help and would be great help. And so rather than this is the end, goodbye, we don't need you anymore, this is the last of our formal meetings as a big group. But what we'd like to do is definitely have you help us through the spring as we put this together. And as we go through and finally get to the last piece today, when there's a questionnaire to fill out, there's a place for you to check off how you would like to help. We've thought of a number of different ways that you could be involved. And then once we get that back and we'll figure out who fits where, and we'll work on contracts again and all that kind of paperwork. But I want you to know that we're not dropping you at this point at all. You're integral to this, and really it's your voices we want to hear come through on this website. The research you've done, the oral history that you want to sort of own and update, that kind of thing. So that's the big overview. Flora's going to help lead a conversation to get your reaction to this. We're not set in stone yet, obviously. We need to hear from you. And particularly, how can we, if this idea is going in the right direction, that would be the first question, how can we tweak it and make it even better? And along the way, if there's need for clarification, any of us who are in on the conversation, or if we need clarification from you, we'll just all jump in, right? Okay, so I'll turn this over to you.
Thanks.
You did what I did. You did pocket today.
Yeah, no, sadly. It's one of the drawbacks of being female is so few of your clothing options have pockets. Deeply unfair. So, really, my role here is to hear from you about your response to what Beth just presented and the material in front of you. What feedback do you have, thoughts, things that you'd like us to tweak or change, concerns, anything like that. And I'll make notes here on the board. Yeah, you can take your time to read over it, reflect. Oh. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Yes, Jeremy.
So I'm interested in the Digital Oral History Project and the website as a platform. This is actually a very common platform done by a number of institutions for these kinds of histories. But I'm interested in what models were under consideration for developing this. Like, were there any specific examples that were discussed? With oh, these are good models for a particular history. Because there are particular ethics that that are involved with creating a digital history. And I'm just wondering how those are being accounted for. What is seen as a good example of this now, and what are the ethics regarding construction that involved in those that kind of influence this idea?
Okay. I mean, I don't feel like I'm necessarily the person who can respond to this.
No, I just meant, do you want response or do you want to just get out a lot of concerns first?
I would feel like it would be more useful to have responses as we have the questions, just so that we can, have a conversation.
As Beth mentioned, we talked a lot about involving youth. And then, did you say, Beth, that the grant sort of made that not as viable as we thought in the beginning? Because as you say, a lot of us talked about involving young people.
Right. Okay, so you're on a different subject. Let me answer Jeremy, and then I'll come to that.
Okay.
So, Jeremy, we have done a series of digital history projects here at HSP. And the one that would probably be not in structure, but in terms of complexity, the most similar would be one called Anonymous No More, which came out of the Artist Embedded project that AIM worked on. When I say the structure is different, is that it does not use a timeline as its basic mechanism, right? One of the other things in talking with our IT department, though, is that the Drupal platform that we've used to create those digital history projects in the past, of which we have 4 or 5, is becoming unstable. So we need to move to something new. So he's actually going to look for a new tool. And we are, if you have any suggestions, any of you, looking for suggestions for that. We want something that's open source, that has a lot of people using it, so that we can continue updates in that way for the back end of it. Is this about that?
Sort of.
Okay. And then we'll get to you, Randy. I won't forget you.
No, that's fine.
And I wasn't here the last time, so I don't want to take this in a completely different direction, but I heard about a program, I think it was in New York, that used a technology that was able to create an app connected to a web page. And what the app did is that it synced with geolocation. So when you went to a particular site and you were standing by the site, then you could get information about that site, like the oral histories that talked about that site, and like historical information of that site would pop up when you are actually standing there. And that, to me, I know for youth, but also for adults and also for the sense of community, to be able to create a template so that when you're actually moving through the neighborhood, it's giving you information about points in the neighborhood, I think would be really powerful. So I think it's like there's a slight difference, but it's still the same idea. And I don't know how complex the technology.
Geographic-based to time-based.
Both. Yeah, because it's geographic in the sense that like the information's connected to a specific geographical site, but it's time-based in the sense that it's actually involving you in the history because you're moving through space as opposed to like sitting at a.
It's called geofencing.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome, and I think it's like innovative, and particularly for young people. I know this as it's attached to for adult audiences, but I think for adults too, that would be much more engaging, and also a way to put like people within the neighborhood itself. Like if they got the app, then they could see the history around them, which would be super cool. I don't know what the technology to build something like that is like, but I think it would add a dimension to this.
I know we started with that a little bit last summer with one called Tour Buddy. More on the.
Just again, I mean, I don't know that much about the technology and the cost of it, and it may be, too costly to consider, but this is one of the things we are considering for the follow-up project that Taller is doing, and there is funding in that proposal for something like that. So that could be definitely tied to this.
Yeah, and one of the things we were thinking about in our conversations was how can this then provide information that can be sourced for the memorializing Fair Hill. So that could be a connection. You want to say something else, Jeremy?
Yeah, I just have a question about design. So anytime we're going with a mediated approach to history, like ideas and concerns about representation kind of come to the foreground for me. And I'm just wondering where within the structure here is there room for actual like Latino and Puerto Rican designers, either graphic designers, web designers, consultants, because I think that's going to be really important on both the look and presentation of the website itself. And I think it's, as much as this is about that community, I think it's equally important to have them involved within the production. And I'm just wondering if there were particular points where you saw them coming into play there in the production of the website.
I think that's a really good point. I don't think we've gotten that far in the planning because we didn't want to go too far before we even knew if we were going down the right path. Yeah. I know certainly in conversations that Monica's been having about graphic designers, we've been looking that way.
Randy wanted to say something and then.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So now we'll go to the youth piece. So the way the grant was structured, the idea was that if these were audience-developed programs, then the audience at the program mirrored the audience that was in the pods. And so the pods were put together to be constituents of TAIR or HSP because we wanted to begin to share audiences. And because of the nature of doing this kind of work, there's a whole other layer of complication when you add kids in, you know, in terms of permissions and all that kind of thing. So it was structured to be adults. That said, when you were talking about youth, I think that the definitions tended to be high school into college. And certainly, Masada sitting here, we figured it was one person in that age range anyway. And so we were thinking that for the spring, we would try to identify a couple people who have been working perhaps within summer camps or classes that TAIR and HSP have run that we could add and get their input. So at least there would be some of their input into the site as we began to move forward. And then we really do that push that would be curriculum with teachers and students next year.
I wanted to ask about if the resources, the online resources, will be in both English and in Spanish. Okay, that's good. And then another thing that I'm thinking is that I would almost like someone to do promotional work for the website. Like it's not enough that you just blast it out to everyone on your contact list, but maybe have people go out to different groups within the city to tell them about the website. Because I see it as sort of not just bringing in the audience of people like us, but new people who don't know anything about either organization. And the only way you're going to do that is through reaching out face to face to different groups.
Do you want to say anything now, Monica, or you want to wait and just say, well, we're going to deal with this later in the meeting?
What I can say right now is I hear you and I'm writing this all down, and I think that's a really good point. We're certainly interested in exploring platforms for just distribution that are not just social media or email marketing or blasting it out there, but we really do want to make deep and meaningful connections with people who are going to use this and perhaps contribute to it. And I think a big part of that actually is going to be the program that Beth mentioned that we're planning in early March, where we'll be soliciting feedback from the community and wanting to get them involved. So one of the things that we want to reach out to you folks for are ideas for community groups, leaders, organizers who we should make sure are in the room for that program so that when it comes time to really release it, you know, they're already on board and they can help us connect with more people. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other? So we've heard about thinking more deeply about the platform, whether to add a geographic piece, to think about who's working on it, both youth and from different communities, marketing, anything else?
I don't know. I could see this being good and also bad, but this goes back to something that you said, Jeremy, a couple of times ago about who controls the narrative. Not just like who's creating the site, but who controls the narrative. I wonder if there's a way to also make it living history. So like if there's a specific site in the neighborhood that had historical meaning. But then if somebody's going through the website and that site and what happened there has a connection to their lives because they live close to it, or like their family was affected in some way, if there's some way to allow them to interact with the website so that they can like upload their own stories.
That is a fabulous idea. We even talked about that in our meeting. It is so beyond the scope of our resources. We tried that with an earlier project, Villa Place, and it takes an enormous amount of resources ongoing, year after year, to maintain that, as well as the cost to actually build it in. That for now, we put it aside. You know, who's not to say there'd be a project some other time where you could add it back on, but.
Well, even if it's as simple, like if the geolocation app works, if like there's a space within the geolocation app for people to leave like a comment about that particular location.
What I want to say is let's take your comment and see what is possible. I also just wanted not to build your expectations too high for what can be accomplished at this point.
I'm curious to know about the high school curriculum for 2019 and 2020, and who's going to be writing this curriculum and how it's going to be implemented. I mean, is this across the district? Would this be available at all?
Those are questions we, have not gotten to yet. The only thing I can tell you is how we typically do things here, is that when we write new curriculum, it has to be somehow based in our collection. So it has to start from archival sources, and in this case we would have Tyara's archival sources, we would have what's on the website. We have a teacher advisory group that we preview things with. We also often use interns from education schools to help with the work. So I can tell you that is a typical way we go about it. I can't tell you what we would do for this one specifically.
Great, I think it's a great idea.
So.
Do you feel as though you see your words in this text? In other words, do you feel as though,
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm impressed the way you were able to distill the main themes and ideas that came out into something fairly concrete. I'm also finding it really confusing that Beth's dressed all in flowers and you're not, because you always wear flowers.
Well, I figure with my name, I don't need extra flowers,
You usually do, though. Other than that.
I guess I'm just gonna also, give you a sense of some of the maybe rationale that is behind it. One of the things that we're doing, this together, obviously, is because, there's a lot of histories in our community that are not told and that need to come up to the surface. And this really, this model allows for the opportunity to make so many connections, both within the history that is inside the historical society that nobody knows that it's here, that connect to our community, as well as make this constant communication between the two agencies, because people are going to be able to click on links that connect to Taller and click on links that connect to HSP. So it's a model that really allows for a lot of that kind of intent that was behind the whole collaboration from the beginning. So I just wanted to stress.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as someone who's working on a similar kind of digital archive myself with testimonials, I see it as a beneficial platform. My own concern that I just want to raise as we start thinking more about production and we get into the details is who is asking the questions in the oral history. Because just as important as, again, who's in front of the camera responding is who's actually asking. So I would just like to flag if you could have, they don't necessarily have to be Puerto Ricans, but as many Latinos as possible trained in oral history techniques. And that can come from Temple, that can come from all of the the different resources here in Philly. But the one thing that I've seen with projects attempted like this for minority groups in the past has been a failure to have people who can relate to those stories and issues and to the history producing it as being the interviewer. And this leads to a lot of different kinds of biases within the interviews themselves. So as someone who's had to critique these in the past and these kinds of interviews, that's always been a fault that I've run into again and again and again. So I just wanted to raise it so that everyone's thinking about it when you actually come to decide, all right, well, who's going to actually go out and do the field work?
But remember that the context is already here. I mean, a lot of, of what is going to be captured in this is already what you have been doing and saying. The newer, probably somewhat limited interviews, yes, will be done with the idea of trying to fill, gaps that may not have been already captured in what is already being done by you all. So we're not talking about doing a whole bunch of new sets of interviews and a new set of histories.
Understandably, but it just, who's in front of you asking the question always qualifies the response, so I'm just trying to just phrase that at the beginning.
Actually, one of the things too we might mention here, and I forgot to mention in describing the website, but Carmen, you were really strong about this point, is that we want to go through content that's already been developed about other migrant communities, primarily in HSP collections, but what might also be in Tyers, to tie that into, because part of this grant was to be about time, finding, similar situations in different times and for different peoples as well. And so that is another piece I forgot to put in to mention. Amy?
Well, yeah, I guess I was assuming with the oral histories that it was primarily going to be the oral histories that are at Tyre.
Right.
Okay.
We have a collection here.
Okay, gotcha.
And they need to be translated,
Gotcha.
depending which language they're in the other language, and they need to be digitized.
I just want to add that I think the partnership between Tashare and Historical Society is great. Like, I found out about HSP through going to a WHYY event. And, a face-to-face contact, someone gave me literature, I brought it home, spoke to the person, and it got me to start coming here. So again, we're tapping into new audiences with these two organizations working together. And maybe in the future, more organizations can work together. If we talk about, similar communities and different challenges they have had to go through. Who knows if a partnership will be forged with like Asian Arts Initiative or whatnot because of similar struggles. So something to consider way down the line.
We definitely want this, as Beth emphasized, this is all part of a long ongoing process. This is maybe the last of these meetings, but not only is this project going to have legs, but Tyre's upcoming Memorializing Fairhill project is going to kind of continue some of these concerns, and so this is all part of an ongoing process. Absolutely. So we do want to keep building those networks and connections and building it out, making sure it has a long life.
Were other options discussed other than a website? In other words, in the beginning we would talk about exhibits and things like that. Was that quickly put aside as, again, not within our budget and grant?
No, it wasn't that. It was that if we did something, it was probably just going to take one idea. It was going to have to leave some others behind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know. And you were on the phone.
Everyone seemed to talk about there being a real importance that there was a digital manifestation that went on and could reach out further. So it seemed that was a priority for almost everyone. Even if there was an exhibit, it was about how will that be digitized on the website. So, so we went for the lasting, expansive web presence.
Oh, you were involved. Not only are you involved with our group, but you were in the
I was in the
elitist group.
The elitist, oh dear.
The decision-making group.
The decision suggesting.
Yeah.
Well, and again, the the idea, although, you know, this will take thinking and figuring it out, is to include the art as part of the website as well. So we're trying to, you know, to use sort of one format, but try to bring all of the ideas into it.
And if we did want to do anything with schools, we had to have a place where it would live longer than, you know, exhibition, maybe 3 months, you know?
Right.
I like the model because it's going to give the potential for the largest possible audience, which I think is the ultimate goal, and also that it is the marriage of two archives together on the same platform, if that's the right term. Because often when you do research, you do see links. In other words, if you do research from HSP, you might have a link on a page that goes to the Library of Congress and stuff. But it is not a partnership. Here you have an outright partnership of two similar, but also somewhat different kind of organizations, and they're going to show how they work together. So I think that's also very important too. And I think that was one of the first goals, wasn't it, of the actual grant.
Well, AIM called it a virtual highway between the two. I liked his wording on that.
Do you guys have any other feedback or concerns? Yes, Masada.
I just wanted to say that I really like this, and I think that this would really reach out to a lot of youth, especially because it's online.
Yeah.
And we're always on our phones and stuff like that, so I think this would really reach out. This would help with school projects, anyone that wants to do, say, an essay on their history or just wants to learn about themselves. And I think that I've said this as well, getting more feedback from the youth about this too, on the website, and hearing what they think and how they would like it.
Well, as you know, I think is included in the text, one of the things we want to do as this moves forward is actually identify a couple of, or a small group of young people who are working with folks at Thayer HSP who can help us and be embedded in this process, so that we're not just sort of, the youth with a capital Y, what does the youth want, but actually integrating them into the process. So thank you for that. Yeah.
And just to go along with that, and this might not be, at the right time, but like with Amy, wasn't it you who did something to like kickstart African American requirement history for 9th graders or something like that for the school district of Philadelphia?
No, I was just one of the first teachers once the mandate came down.
Okay, and do we have any mandates to teach about Latin American history? We don't. So, could that be something that when you get a group of educators, that, that's something that's pushed forth, that Latin American history, and obviously Latin American history encompasses a lot, and who knows how much the Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia would receive in that time. Let's say they say, we'll give you 3 weeks or something, but just something that something has to be taught about Latin American in the United States.
That's an interesting point. Yeah. Thank you. Do you guys have any other feedback before we transition to what some of you have already raised as how do we get the maximum audience and engage through marketing and promotion, all of the wonderful stuff that you guys have been doing and we will continue to do? Feedback, questions? Shall we transition to the, yeah, so right now, I don't know if you guys have you introduced yourselves already?
At the beginning.
Okay, wonderful. So we're gonna hear from the marketing team of Thayer and HSP, sort of from their side of how do we give this thing legs on the larger public sphere. So thank you guys very much. And do you want to come up here or do you want to just stay? Oh, okay.
Why don't I take a picture of this, because do you want the whiteboard? Turn it over.
Yep.
No, we can't. Somebody got something very complicated on
Oh
the
my.
back.
There's a lot of numbers on the back. I don't want to touch the numbers. That looks frightening. No. Just stand very close together.
Okay. Okay.
Just lean over.
Hello. Just stand very close.
I
Okay.
can take notes while you guys talk if that would be. I can take
So,
or
yeah.
whatever's easiest for you guys.
So I feel like I should first actually introduce myself. I'm Monica Fonero. I manage communications here at HSP. I'm fairly new to the place. I started February of last year, so not quite a year yet. So I've been sort of watching the progress of this project from afar and tuning in and looking at the photos and checking out the notes and trying to make sense of what's been happening as everything has progressed. And so obviously now that we're a little bit further along and we have a better sense of what the outcome is going to be, who the audiences for the project will be, it's time for us to start putting our heads together and figure out the best way to get it out there in the world. I'm sorry, I didn't give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Katerina Leiden. I'm the development associate at Thayer. Also relatively new there, been there since about June. But there's so much going on there, I feel like it's been longer. But also I do marketing, so for the purposes of this project, I'm collaborating with Monica and sort of deferring to her expertise on the project, but also I'm an artist and I come from a creative background, so curatorial and artistic background, so I sort of bring that like unbridled enthusiasm and like desire to want to take, you know, the creative aspect of the project on, so.
So we, in the coming weeks, would love to connect with you all. We actually did not plan to really have any kind of workshopping going on today, but I feel like this whiteboard is a lot of pressure. What I'll say is we're really committed to making sure that the marketing is, like I mentioned before, we're not just blasting it out and calling it a day. We want to have some storytelling elements that really capture all the nuances of what you guys have been experiencing over the past year. We want to make sure that your voices from this project are being reflected in the design, in the messaging, in the words that we're choosing. And so we'd love to keep you guys connected. In the questionnaire that's going to be distributed later, there will be a question on there that asks if you want to stay involved in marketing and if you want to be in touch with us as we start floating ideas past you and coming up with hashtags and coming up with an elevator pitch, because all the messaging for the project so far about audience embedded, about the idea of having folks you know, coming into these archives and doing this work, it's served us well until now. Now we need new messaging, right? So we want to connect with you guys and make sure that we're developing something that resonates with you, because if it's resonating with you, then it has a solid chance of resonating with more people in the community.
Flora, you make that writing while you're up here look a lot easier than it actually is. But yeah, so one of the things that is exciting is that, you know, you did all this work and all this research, and then you kind of said, well, what kind of projects should we do? But then I think what we collectively realized was that the story that we want to tell, the project that we want to do, half of it has already happened. It is the work that you did. So a lot of that content is already there. It's just a matter of finding the milestones, finding those pieces, those moments where it was transformational for you, things you remember that you cue into, like, and that's where, because we're new to the project, we really do need your sort of input and feedback as to where to look and how to hone our idea of what sparks this for all of you.
Yeah. So please do answer yes on that question, on the questionnaire. I have business cards with me. I'll put them out on the table in case anyone wants to get in touch in the meantime. We produced some flyers so that in the time between now and when we're ready with like new messaging and design, if you're connecting with people who seem interested in the project, I'll let you pass these around. If you're connecting with people who seem interested in the project or seem like they could be kind of strategic partners for us, feel free to
give them one of these. We can get you more copies. We can send out a PDF if you want to print some more, just so that they have a thing that they can look at, a web page that we can point them to. And it also has our social media handles on there, so they can start connecting with both organizations on social media. I think that's everything.
That's it. I mean, what our goal is to, within the time frame as the website's being put together, is to sort of come up with a marketing strategy. And initially we'll need your help to sort of, as I was saying, create that content, create that hashtag, create that idea, that bumper sticker, elevator pitch, whatever you want to call it. But then putting that strategy together is also something that we're going to call on maybe all of you to be ambassadors of. And when the time comes, we'll be providing you with a toolkit of, say you weren't involved in, creating the hashtag or brainstorming for it. We will provide you at some point a complete toolkit as to what to use, the language, the messaging, so that we're all unified. So, because as I think we've sort of realized too, like on-site and online experiences are really the same for cultural institutions, and we need to be where the audience is. And we're going to provide you guys with whatever you need to be ambassadors in your own groups and create those ripples in, the connections that you have. So, more later.
Yeah, stay in touch.
Any comments or questions?
Cool. All right.
Well, when we put this out, make sure it's in both languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to translate the flyer.
Yeah.
Yep.
We didn't have time.
Yeah. We made it 2 days ago. But thank you. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to do this.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, mine's pretty simple.
You're hearing from all of the ones who are usually behind the scenes.
I know, the ones who sit in the corners in the back of the room. Mine is a pretty simple thing. I'm just here to tell you what you're about to do. Are we handing it out at this point? Which is to say, you probably remember that on the very first day that you came in, before you learned anything about this project, we asked you some of your ideas about what you thought this experience was going to be. One of the things that's important for staff to understand at this point in the process is, did you have the experience we thought you were going to have? What experience did you have? So that we sort of know how to conclude for the next time they do these types of projects at these institutions. What worked for you? What didn't work for you? What was the best part? What are the things that you wish you could tell us that we can change? You can tell me anonymously, and it will not come from your name to them. It'll just be sort of helpful feedback. So there's a front side and a back side. The front is really about what you've been doing and how you felt about it. But the back side is a series of questions to the points that were just made by both marketing staff about ways that you can stay involved from today until the end of this project, so that you can tell us and they can streamline their invitations to participate in different aspects of the future of this project. You may be interested in one or two continuing things, but not all of them. You may be interested in all of them. We want to know so that we can advise the staff at both institutions on which of you wants to show up at which program, which of you is really interested in spending more time with objects, which of you really likes things like social media marketing and hashtags, so that they can sort of reach out to you in the most appropriate ways for the next 6 months. Yes?
If this is anonymous, how will you know which one of us is interested?
It is anonymous to them. You put your name on it just so that I know who's answering the thing, but I don't attach your names to the reports that I send back to them.
Questions on the front. In other words, questions on the front, we'll never know who said what.
Nope.
Because only Monica will end up. But for the back, she'll have it.
So to participate, yes, I will tell them Mona is interested in helping with marketing and being on a panel. Does that make sense? But
Yes, I just didn't see it here. So.
Yep, name is on the front. Okay. And please do put your name. I actually know your names by now, but I won't know your name when the paper is in front of me and not your face. So do they have time to answer their questions right now? Great. My guess is it will take you 4 minutes because they are mostly multiple choice. So go ahead, but you can have more than 4 if you need it.
Does anybody need something to write with?
Yes? Sure.
I was trying to ask you questions.
Maybe this was mentioned the first time. Who initiated this project? Was it Pew? Was it the Historic Society? Was it Air? Was it somehow people from the two groups?
Technically, it would be we started it, but right away we knew we wanted to work with Tayer, so we created it together. But because it came off of the last grant we did, the artist embedded, that we wanted to try something with the audience. Right away we knew we wanted that idea, and then it was how we can do it. Somebody else asked me a question I thought that all of you might appreciate hearing the answer to, and that was, how does the funder feel about this? So informally, I think like Bill Adair and Laura Kolsky, who are our representatives at the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage, are happy with what they hear, but we haven't gotten formal feedback at this point. We've had to submit 2 interim grants where we sort of say what we're doing and kept them up to date that way, or we see them around town and there's a question, how's it going, kind of thing. But formally, actually, we are going to them in January to talk to them about where the project is headed now. And I think this is testament to all of where you have taken us on this project, is that it's not going exactly where the grant said it was going to go. So we have to reallocate money, and to get that much money reallocated, we have to go back to the funder. We don't anticipate any problem because they knew they were funding kind of an experiment in program development, but it does go to show that we have moved from where we were, because as I said earlier, we thought of, you were going to help give us these ideas, then we were going to have like an exhibit and a lecture, something very traditional when you say program, not this web thing that embeds all these different pieces of research and reflection and that kind of thing. So I don't anticipate any issue with it, but that is happening in January, that we will be talking directly to the funder. And I am in the process of trying to figure out where we saved a little bit of money here so we can put money there, because the whole tech side can get, as you know, very expensive. And so that will become a governor at some point about what can be done. Are there other logistic questions like that? Things that you've been wondering about that I know Van was asking a question he was wondering about earlier? Well, I guess then we're going to call this to a close as a formal meeting. The food is not here yet, which I have to go check on. But in the meantime, why don't you get your headshots done, and then Gustavo can begin with the videos. Our lunch is a very small additional way of saying thank you to all of you. Really, really enjoyed getting to meet you. Most of you were new to me, and I think the team feels that way as well. You've been a great bunch of people to work with. So with that, we'll sort of close down the formal
part. It will be interesting to hear from the advisors who have been kind of observing from the get-go, and I would be curious to, Ian and Seth, what?
Sean.
Let's do that. Putting me on the spot, Carmen. Come on.
No, you can't pass the ball. The ball's in your head.
I'm not sure what to say. I feel like I've been on the periphery of this, and so I don't feel particularly embedded into this process, which is my fault more than anyone's. But so it's been interesting as an outsider to kind of watch it move along. I've been wondering how much this process itself will end up being the outcome. You know what I mean? Like sometimes the journey is, when you look back on it, the journey was the trip, and so I wonder, looking back, whether the institutional memory at HSP and at Tayer will end up being the process more than the finished product. Maybe apparently it's being documented very well. So that's been interesting. I work at Eastern State Penitentiary, and we're right now we are we're teaching inside of prisons. Where our version of this is trying to spend more time being inside of prisons, working with people who are incarcerated. So we built a process where we teach animation inside of prisons. This is my shameless pitch to come see our programming. We're going to be projecting our students' animated films onto the outside wall of Eastern State. They're 60-second films, doesn't sound like very much. A TV commercial is 30 seconds, so 60 seconds can really say something. And 60 seconds of animation is actually a lot of work. So we're going to be projecting our students' films. And I was in class this week, I was telling Aine, I was in class this week and I was wondering how much the process of making the films is actually in the end going to be more important than the films themselves. You know, that it got, the students appear to be really connected with the conversations, and it's connecting us and it's making us go in every single week, week in, week out. So that's just off the top of my head. I also wondered the same thing that to be totally, if I may, just be totally blunt, I always wonder how much the documentation of something affects the thing itself. And so I'm like really self-conscious that as I'm reflecting on this, I'm getting filmed. And we brought in, we're doing the exact same thing. It's what you do for the funders, you know. So, well, in our case, it's not just for the funders, but we're gonna make a documentary film about the process. So we were in this week, we had our film crew in, and there's a film group called Ming, Media in Neighborhood Group, comprised mostly of people who've been incarcerated, which is really interesting to be with someone who's been incarcerated going back into a prison. But they were filming this week, and it totally changed the dynamic of the class, because all of a sudden, it was great, it was really cool, and it was a great class for them to have seen. But having them there changed things. And so every so often in this room, I wonder, honestly, how much having the cameras impacts how the discussions go. I don't know if that's just me, but I always feel like we do it too. I mean, I think it's what you end up doing. But those are reflections off the top of my head, whatever they're worth.
I hope we didn't come off as the deciders, because we didn't think we were that. I mean, we hoped that
I missed the phone call, so my hands are clean.
No, it's okay, but I think that we hoped that this idea was a responsive container to all the ideas you had put forth, and the best way we could imagine to manifest all of them and not have to select. We didn't want to be the selectors. You're the selectors, and to give it a kind of permanence and reach, because the other thing we felt was really potentially wrong was that in any way your work would be made smaller by it disappearing, like the history you're trying to now make not disappear. So we hope that this would lend permanence and scale to your work.